Hi, I just wanted to give you some feedback. We just talked, but you also asked to have it recorded just in case so you could hear it. So on the screen right now is where you submitted your item. And to the right, you can't see it all on the screen right now. Let's see. To the right, you can see a lot of the feedback that I have there. And so some of the three things we talked about was using smaller words, using words that the general population would understand, and putting fewer words on each slide. And that's because you're going to be, quote unquote, presenting this to your population, which is Black women 25 to 45. So here's an example on this slide. What is suicide? You could have fewer words. We talked about the sentence that says, although mental illness is an important risk factor, suicide is often influenced by a combination of psychological, biological, and social and environmental factors. You could simply say, suicide is caused by um, you personally, the people around you, and where you live and work. So it could be that simple, and that's just an example of how to get it down. We talked about this slide, epidemiology. Other than people that are in college, most people have no idea what epidemiology means. So you could simply say, "Did you know?" is the title of the slide, and you could say things like, "More women uh, than men attempt suicide, that women between 30 and 50, excuse me, have lots of stressors." You could say that, "Did you know that the suicide rates are higher for people who live in areas that are not the city areas? So people who live in the country actually have more suicide." And those are just some examples. You would not want all those words on the slide. You would say at the top, "Did you know, question mark, more women than men attempt suicide, more men than women complete suicide, people who live in the country areas, not city areas, have higher suicide rates, and that not middle adulthood, but being in the age group that you're in, 30 to 50 years old, is a stressful time of life." So that's just some examples. Risk factors, again, fewer words. Most people do not know what perimenopause and menopause, they know what menopause is, but they don't know what perimenopause is. So you could just say menopause and put, before you go into menopause, these things happen, and list some things that happen. And during menopause, these things happen. But you could just say before menopause and during menopause is the top of the slide, because perimenopause is not something. The history thing, you have good information, but you could just put, for example, you could put, these are three laws and policies that went into place, and you could just list the three laws and then talk about those three items. They're not all laws, but you could talk about them. Pathologizing, femininity, you would need to change that, and that you would say critiquing femininity, or criticizing femininity, but you want to use different words. Economic stability, most people know what that means, and you could just reword it in the slides. Healthcare accessibility is very complicated. You could just say some people have a hard time getting to the healthcare they need. And then you could just bullet those three things: shortage of mental health providers. When people live in the country area, there are other barriers, and talk about those. And then delayed treatment for mental health, talk about that. You don't need all these words on here. And that's true for everything. So again, really good. You hit all the points. Fewer words on the slide, smaller words, words that your audience will understand. And one other thing that we didn't talk about that people really like is when there's images on the slide. So if you can find some images of Black women in your age group that you could put on a couple slides, or if you had, let's see, major risk factors, if you had some images that you find in clip art that you could put on, that would be great. So those are just things to consider. And I didn't mention the images, but that does help make your slides much more enjoyable to an audience. Great job, and I look forward to seeing the final project.